Hey sword fans, time for another unboxing video. I have an absolutely immense amount of swords to show you at the moment. I have had a bit of a slow month or so, like updating the site, but I have been traveling, I've been gathering items, and I have some absolutely spectacular things to show you. Not really an unboxing, because some of you have seen these items already. They have all come up with me back to my home, and now they're in my office, ready to show off. And well, before I start, new Mameluke, So I've had this a while. It's just not been on my wall, and that is my new love. It is a double stamped Prosser to the Bombay Light Cavalry. I have a Bombay Rifle Officer's Sword coming soon. And it is, where is it? A wonderful EIC Cavalry Mameluke. So since I've got this, I've moved on most of my EIC swords because this is the grail. Light Cavalry, wonderful horn hilt, silver medallions on there, and it's just wonderful. And made by Prosser, the finest swords maker of his time. So yeah, new addition to the wall. I just thought I'd show you that. I think everything else has been shown before. Okay, now that's nice and safely back. Let's start with the unboxing. So, I'm going to roughly be going through this in sections. So I'm going to do Indian, British Victorian, Georgian, other, and then the fancy stuff. So if you want to see the fancy stuff, sort of like stay on to the end. And yeah, some of these might cross the boundaries of these categories a bit, but they're all going to be vaguely bunched together. So to start off, I have a bunch of Indian swords. These are all relatively entry level. This one is quite fun as it is. There we go. Signed to the hilt. It is a pattern welded blade. I've etched a little bit of it and it shows a nice wavy pattern all the way up the blade. Needs to be cleaned. Has the remains of silver on the guard. And it's hefty too. Well, I take an extra large glove, and that is a big sword. So by Indo-Persian standards, that is huge. Number 2 for Indo-Persian. A little bit smaller in the hilt, a little bit more presence in the blade. Has the remains of a yeoman there. I'm not sure if you can really get that on camera, but there is a rear edge where it's kind of swelled. This sword, I would say, is late 18th century, early 19th century, more Afghan than anything else. It has those lovely floral terminals and the bar there, which goes through, as well as the pitch glue that would usually hold this together. Quite a hefty piece. It's munitions grade, but it is old and quite nice. I do like Afghan swords when they come up, because usually I would go for something like a pulwar, and I saw a few good pulwars while I was travelling, but this one just spoke to me because it's a trooper's weapon. It's not a fancy sword. It is just a nice, good piece of what it is. Another slightly small but very old one. This one is mid-18th century, and it has a Ferengi blade, which as you can see has been eaten up quite a bit. It has a nice moon marking there. This blade is likely European, North Italian, Southern German, like possibly a large production Solingen blade, and it fits into what we would call a Ferengi, or it's a Sarohi Ferengi. And the hilt is why I got this. Rather wonderful hilt there. Pommel is a bit chewed up again, but again, This is mid-18th century, 17 sort of 50s, and it's lovely. But the thing that really got me interested is those two lines on the side of the hilt indicate that this used to have a basket or a protective plate, similar to what you'd find on a spadroon, but as a good example of what would have been there, that is what has been removed or lost to time. That one will be going up later this week. This is one that I've shown off already. This sword really speaks to me. It came from someone I've known for quite a while, and their collection is small but wonderful. It's very well curated, and they really pick up wonderful things. And it came to me in a swap, part exchange, with a few other bits, and it is just a very nice toolbar. Again, this one is what would have been considered munitions grade. It is slightly older, early 19th. I don't think we're heading into the 18th century with this one, but it has the nice canted disc. Originally, it would have had a plain hilt, but this one has had silver additions. This is Kofgari that has been added rather than manufactured this way. The blade is quite nice. It's a shorter saber blade, and it has been edge hardened. So when I etched it, it showed up a darker line towards the edge. Slightly uneven where you can see the blade has been sharpened down, and also the scabbard is slightly bigger, so I guess it would have had a swell towards the tip, which has been sharpened down. But it is a very lovely sword. And after I saw this one, I just sort of fell in love with it. And yeah, this is one that really, it's not like spectacularly shiny. The silver isn't perfect. The blade isn't woots or pattern welded. But it has a story and it speaks to me, and it's just kind of wonderful. Scabbard as well. It has a knotted, I think they would have been for like resting in sashes, that's the word I'm looking for. Nice little tip there. This is leather. This leather's been likely redone mid-19th century, and it has a cut down rear of the scabbard, so when you're drawing you don't have any problems drawing, because some of these can get a bit stuck. Looking alright. This is not exactly Indo-Persian, but it is of the same sort of category that I would put it in. This is a North African nimcha, and it is quite interesting because it has an early 18th century, potentially late 17th century, but again, with these things you've got to lean forward rather than back, because you don't want to be giving the wrong impression, especially if there's no maker's marks. But this has a European blade, beautiful fullering. See if we can capture that. And the terminal where the fullering ends is just really nice. It's straighter than most nimchas. It is straighter than everyone I've had. It's bigger than most, which is why I picked it up, because I love big swords. And it's just wonderful. Has its original scabbard with a Moroccan leather covering. Moroccan leather, of course, very famous for their red, deep umber colouring. Put this one away. And yeah, it's a wonderful nimcha. It just shows trade in the 19th century, the love and reverence of these big European hefty blades that were put in hilts all over the world. Is there a marking? I may have just spotted a marking. I may have to clean this up a bit later. But this one will be coming to the site. I'm very excited to have this, and they are just delightful swords. last for the Indo-Persian is this. It's another Ferengi. I have to step back because it's quite a large sword. Hilt, again, relatively large. It's a bit tight, but I can get my hand in. It is a rather nice silver inlaid hilt. It has a silver inlaid nath, which a bit bigger than usual. Not as delicate as some, but yeah, it's there. And silver knuckle bow. Very delicate finial on the end of it as well. And what makes this quite a fun one, and the reason that I have known the last two owners of this sword, and I've wanted it for a while, and it just came my way. I finally made the plunge. Is this? That is the remains of a GR stamp from an 1804 cutlass. This is a true Ferengi, which we can identify because it has a foreign blade. It's not one that's likely made or in the style of. This one has a blade from a British naval soldier. This is an other rank sword, so quite a hefty piece. And it is on a rather delightful hilt. And yeah, I'm again somewhat in love with it. As you can see, I do not buy swords that do not interest me. Quick water break. Stay hydrated. Never write scripts. Just wing it. And yeah, as you can see, I only ever buy swords I like. Never ones that are just there to make money. Otherwise, I'd have piles of 1897s, and they just don't do it for me. They're very dull. Okay, now on to the British Victorians. Here is quite a fun one. I actually owned this sword. This is one of the first 10 swords I sold. I sold this to a good friend of mine who did a bit of a swap back with me. I've been asking about this sword for ages because I just love it. It is an 1845. It's quite an early one. It has very nice deep engravings. Needs a bit of a clean, but generally really quite good condition. It is made by Hebert & Co. Quite an ornate proof stamp, and it has the folding guard. Has the remains of its liner as well, which is quite fun. And one of the reasons I love this is because it has the matching Hebert mark there. Let me see if I can. Everything is safe. Those little lockets are quite hard to find. You don't see them on many swords. They were an extra, I would say, on higher end swords retailed by people. And it's just nice. It needs a bit of a clean. Gilt is largely remaining, actually. And it just feels good in the hand. And there's just a bit of me that's just nostalgic. If I get the chance to own a sword that I have owned a while back, I will likely take it. I do lots of swaps back for items just because I only sell what I love, so I love getting it back. This one just came in a job lot. 1845 PK weight sword. Still got quite a bit of presence behind it, and it was made by Robert Mole. And it has the fancy Robert Mole logo. Let's see if that's good. Focus, there we go. There we go. These PK swords, I have a few in my personal collection. I like them. Not everyone does. Because they were essentially for dress. You'd have your combat sword and you'd have your PK sword. But quite a lot of people with their PK swords would actually carry them in combat. We have references to it because they just preferred a lighter sword. Where else are we going to go with Victorian? Okay, here's quite a nice one. This one came from the same person as the last one. and it's just quite nice. As most of you know, I spent quite a lot of time in Portsmouth. I lived there for 5 or 6 years, and one of the prize swords in my collection is the most ornate 1827 pattern sword from Portsmouth I've ever seen by a manual. This one is a Wilkinson. It has the highly decorated guard. It's got all the extra added details you'd expect of a Wilkinson. That back strap is just so incredibly nicely done, and it's just lovely. It has nice etchings, and there it shows it's the Royal Dockyard Battalion. These were the Royal Navy chaps who were in charge of defending the Royal Docks, and they are part of the reason that Britain has so rarely been invaded, because the Royal Dockyard Battalion and the naval defences such as Fort Nelson and the sea forts just created a ring of steel around the United Kingdom. And this is a wonderful sword carried by a chap who defended Britain's shores, and quite a lot of them were Navy officers who moved away from their sea service. This one has lost its numbering. I can see a 3 there, so maybe it's 15,000. It's quite an early one. I may need to clean it to see if I can find it, but as it is, I'm putting it up for sale on Researched, because the numbers do look a bit faint. But yeah, rare sword, Royal Navy, and it is Royal Dockyard Battalion. And a Wilkinson, which is always an added bonus. Just show that. And again, that wonderful lion head pommel there. Now we are on to my favourite of the Victorian lot. Well, actually this one isn't Victorian, this is William IV. This is an 1822 pattern infantry officer's sword. It is the Gothic hilt, which is why I bunched it in with the rest. And it is a pikeback. I like pikebacks. Anyone who follows me and has followed me for a while knows I have a bit of a thing for pipebacks. They are very nice. It's this concept of a razor blade attached to a girder. It will cut, but also it will not break. They are stunning swords, and they also have really nice etchings. This one is by Davies and has been marked as warranted. And there you can just about get that. It has quite nice panel etchings there, and that's William IV. The thing that makes this sword is the fact that it is named. That is Brevet Major James Kirkman, who, for all intents and purposes, is sharp. He served in the Rifles. He stormed 2 breaches through 1810 to 1814. He served at practically every major battle and was taking part in pushing the French back into France from Spain. He wasn't part of the invading army in Portugal, which was a couple of years before, as he was in a foot regiment before he moved to the Rifles. But this sword followed him through the Peninsular Wars. And the thing that really gets to me is he volunteered to be in Forlorn Hopes twice. And if you're not sure what a Forlorn Hope is, you will, let me explain so you realise how impressive this is. The Forlorn Hope is a group of men who charge the breaches of a walled city or a fortress. The engineers would knock down the wall with cannons or mines or bombs. And then a Forlorn Hope would volunteer or be volunteered. Not all the time was the volunteering necessarily voluntary. But it was well known that to be in a Forlorn Hope meant, firstly, you loot the city first, and also promotions. And for lots of officers, if you couldn't purchase a promotion, you would get one for storming a city. And this chap, James Kirkman, He stormed 2 cities. I'm writing an article on this guy. This sword is going up for sale. And it's just the history in this sword. Because he started serving in the late 18th century and he completed his service in the early Victorian period. He was in Montego Bay and Dublin as a barrack master. And in Montego Bay, he likely took part in the Baptist uprising, which was one of the unfortunate slave uprisings. So he had a service of almost like 40 years. And it's just quite incredible that this is the sword of a man who, in his earlier years, because that's not the sword he carried, this sword was purchased in 1830s. But the man who owned this sword, he took castles, he took part in over a dozen battles. He was in the Peninsula Campaign and the campaign in Belgium. And he may have faced off against Napoleon. It's just a very impressive sword. And when I researched it and found out the history of the man who had it, I was just astounded. Moving on to slightly older swords now, we're going into the 18th century. And we're easing in with a brass-hilted spadroon. This is no one knows what to call these. So this is an artillery officer's spadroon. It's a 1780s pattern, very similar to the Windsor Guard sword that I did a video on, I think it was last month. And it has a very similar hilt. It is a very similar hilt to the Honourable Artillery Company sword. And it may even be an Honourable Artillery Company. But it has the vestigial quillons of a court sword, the knuckle bow of a rather nice spadroon. The guard plate is essentially a small sword, and it has a spadroon blade, which is an unetched blade that is likely just a combat blade. And it comes with a near perfect condition leather and gilt brass scabbard. The gilding has gone from the scabbard. Gilding is almost 100% present on the hilt. And if you can't afford mint condition, this is as near as you're going to get without paying the extra £1,000 for a sword that looks like it was made yesterday. It is stunning. It is 18th century. I think these likely stopped being made about 1785, when there were more regulations in place. So artillery swords after that, you tend to see them as just being knuckle bow sabres, or you see them as infantry spadroons. Oh, and just in case you didn't see, it has cannon on both sides. Quite a nice little decorated pommel. What next? So this is quite a fun one, because this is a cheap and cheerful. This is going on the site for less than £300. It is as you can see, a damaged infantry officer's sword. It has the remains of its clasp for locking the hilt up. Again, damaged, not amazing, but the blade is quite fun. So on this side, you can see that is a John Gill blue and gilt blade. John Gill was one of the best swords makers of his time. After people like Prosser stopped making swords, the Gills took over. So Thomas, John, and Elizabeth, and maybe one more, they were making some of the best swords of the times. Their warranted blades were famous. And this one it has the Prince of Wales feathers. And if I can get that in, it has an attributed guard. Now, it's a volunteer attributation. It is quite well done. It is to a Lieutenant Royston Barton of the Prince of Wales Volunteers. They were a militia regiment, and details on militia sword militia officers are very scarce. So I can't research this, and I'm not going to restore it, so it's not worth my time to research. But this is a nice attributed 18th century, early 19th century, cheap and cheerful. Ooh. Let's go for another weird one. What are we at? 25 minutes. This is going to be a long video. I am halfway through. I will most likely be doing smaller videos on the individual swords, but you guys all go crazy for my unboxing videos, and before I upload, I thought it might be quite nice. So, quite a fun one here. This is a steel hilt 1796 Padroon. It is quite nice. It's oversized as well, which is what I like. And it has a hefty, flattened hexagon small sword blade. Blue and gilt. No maker mark, but it's likely a German import, potentially a Runkel. The fun thing is that it has the added extra of the Turk's head, which you don't often see on these blades, so it's quite a fun one. Not the most rare sword, but the fact that it's big enough for a gauntlet is quite intriguing. Again, we are sticking with spadroons, and again, steel hilt. This is a heavy cavalry style hilt, carried by anyone who wanted it as a combat sword, really. These were preferred by Scottish officers, from what I've seen from named examples. The fact that it's steel as well, it also means it's likely more of a combat sword. It has been blackened. It's got some staining on there, but it has definitely, that is original chemical blackening on there, and it has a nice silver hilt and what I believe are the owner's initials on the back, so WL. That is usually where you'd find a maker's mark, but that is definitely not a maker's mark. That has been added later, and it's just a very nice spadroon. It's a rare style with some funky additions. It has silver and steel rather than brass and copper, and it's just quite nice. Moving on from there. So we are going across the water now. This is a pre-revolution French épée du soldat with a scabbard, which is fun. It's not the largest sword. This is likely a NCO's rather than officers'. Officer swords were very, very fancy, for the most part. And this one has a fleur-de-lis armory stamp on both sides, which for the most part indicates pre-revolution. Some blades were reused, and it is just generally quite nice. So for a 1760s military sword, that is just about as good as you can get. These are relatively easy to find, but they don't often have marked blades. They don't often have their grip wire, and this is the first one I've seen with the scabbard, which, yeah, makes this a nice example. And now we are on to stirrup hilts. Firstly, a child sword. Now, lots of you won't know this, but I love children's swords. I have a few customers who pick up every child sword that I've ever purchased because they have good taste, same as me, I hope. And this is an 1805, so it is essentially a diminutive spadroon. It has a small sword blade on it because why would you put a spadroon blade on something that's 29 inches long? It may have been carried by an actual midshipman, because midshipmen would be joining the military aged 11, 12, and they may not have seen sea service at that time, but they would definitely have been in naval colleges. And it's just petite and lovely. And the details on it are really quite nice. And rather than the flat guard, this has a circular guard, which has been engraved and it has about 50% of its gilding remaining, which you don't always see. This is one I posted about a few days ago, and this is an armed association sword. So this sword I can date very nicely. This dates to between 1793 and 1802. This is one of the original militia swords, or the last unofficial militia swords the British had before they formed their militias. The armed associations were, as you would imagine, associations of gentlemen and more well-to-do tradespeople who would arm themselves, and they were ready to defend the country against the French. They would get together and train in very similar fashion to the way that the English longbowmen would train with their bows after church every week. These chaps would get together once a week and they would train in sword, bayonet and musketry practice, and often they were better shots than the regular army, because I believe the regular army, they would give you 3 to 6 practice shots a year, but the armed associations were self-funded, so they could purchase as much powder and ball as they wanted. And get up close, it has a nice reeded hilt, has a pillow pommel or cushion pommel. Hopefully you can see there, armed association. I believe there is the name of the area it came from, but that can't be seen. It has worn out. This is an etched blade rather than engraved blade, so it would have been very expensive during its time, but etchings wear away easier than engravings. So that one is a mystery. It may still appear if it cleans up well. Again, we are sticking with the 1786 style. Here is a blue and gilt sabre. This is very choppy. This one comes with an attribution, but I cannot confirm it. It had a label and some paperwork on it, but there is almost no way of verifying it because, again, volunteers, very hard to pin down. This unit of volunteers is the Cinque Port Volunteers, which is the Kent coastline, and so that way to you. And they were units that, again, were there to defend against the potential French invasion. Hydration break. This is a very long video. I can see why Matt Easton keeps them to 10 minutes. So, Cinque Port. These are coastal defences, and the Cinque Port, the volunteers were absorbed into the regular army, with lots of their officers going on to serve in the war in France and the Peninsular War. This sword is dated from, I believe, 1798 to 1802. Ignore the computer sounds. As you can tell, this is a very unprofessional video. I am dehydrated and I'm just playing with swords. But that's what you're here for. And again, this sword is really quite nice. There is some staining on the blue and gilt, but it is generally in good condition. Better on one side than the other, and it is a Runkel Solingen blade on a steel-hilted 1786 style knucklebow. Moving on to the last two of the Georgian military swords, we have these two, which I'm going to show as a pair. Partly to save time, partly because they are a pair. They were both made by Samuel Harvey of Birmingham. They are both 1788 style infantry officers' spadroons. They have very similar grips and guards. The interesting difference is that this one is slightly older, this one is slightly later. They came from a single collection and they were together, so they may have had the same owner. And I can see why. This is a very nice little nimble sword. This one is a flat-bladed combat sword. This one is essentially a back sword. It wants to chop. You could use this for lead cutting or clay cutting. It is a very, very hefty piece. And this piece, it is a combat sword, but it's very nimble. And I would prefer this if I were fighting with it. But this one is just more beautiful. So as you can see, this one is S. Harvey at the back. Hopefully that shows up. Get my face out of the way. It has lots of its original polish on it still, which is quite fun. And the thing that excites me is that beautiful terminal to the fullers there, leading to a spear-pointed blade. It's just a wonderful sword. I will show you the close-up of the other one. This is also a wonderful sword. They just fell over slightly against another box. This is the flat-bladed version. And it is just wonderful. It's very heavy, it wants to swing, it wants to cut. It feels very similar to a cutlass. It has a nice back strap, quite a delicate little set of langets there. And again, quite a lot of original polish on there. It has some deterioration on the tip, which you expect when swords are kept in their scabbards. Things get a bit moist. Where are we now? We are in the final stretch. So, now, hangers. So this one, I'm not sure if I can or will sell it. I have photographed it, I have played with it, I have written up a description, but this one has been with me for a while, and I decided I would show it off because it has not really been seen. This is a massive lump of ivory, and if I do sell that, I will be going through DEFRA and getting the ivory certificate for it, which is the only way you can sell ivory legally in this country now. I've generally not sold any ivory since the new laws came in. I've just been holding on to it. It has become part of my collection. But this one, I have considered moving on because it's just huge and obnoxious, and it is green ivory with a lion head pommel, which has had its guard removed and a new bolster fitted. So this is just a long, essentially a hunting knife, which is what this would have been used for. Maybe it could have been a sidearm, but I can't see it being used as such. Though it is very similar to the George Washington hanger with green ivory hilt. That also has a very minimal guard, whereas this one has none. But the blade, the man in the moon, the sun, the stars, and it has the blowing wind. These swords are all unmarked, the ones with this selection of symbols on. And I believe they are some of the nicest 18th century blades in the world. I'm getting another one coming back to me soon that I sold, I think, 3 years ago, purely because it has these marks on it. I love them. They feel good. They feel like you're cutting with air. There is nothing, no strain on my wrist. It feels like there's nothing in my hand. This sword is weightless. It is well balanced. It is wonderful. And whether it's this small hanger or a large hussar sword or even a straight bladed palash, if they have these markings on them, I will buy it because they feel wonderful in the hand. Moving on. This is a silver hilted hanger, English. It is fully hallmarked. And with quite nice following there. Very delicate, dainty little guard and an antler grip there. This one is early 18th century. I believe this hallmark states it's 1734, but I will have to double check. It is just a wonderful piece. I have had this before. I have sold. This will be the third time I'm selling this sword, and I keep on taking it back just because it's lovely, and it always sells because it is lovely. It feels choppy. It feels light. And it's silver, and English silver, the fact that you can date it down to the year, the man who made it, the man who hilted it, perfect. It's exactly my thing. Staying with silver, here is a rather wonderful French hanger. This sword is also silver. It has a there you go. That is a French tax stamp. I believe that is 1762 or 1767. I need to look under a better glass to make sure which of the details it really is. Again, this sword feels weightless. The hilt is ebony. It has silver back straps. Everything is silver except the blade. There is some slight damage there, but it is, again, silver. It is a soft metal. It's not steel. It's not brass. And these guards are hollow. It happens. This is a relatively cheap and cheerful piece. And let me grab one. So, for comparison, this piece is the blade is in a bit better condition and the guard hasn't been damaged, and that is £1,500. This is a fraction of that and is just as wonderful a sword. It just has one slight speck of damage there and the blade has got some wear. So if you want to sell for bargain that's 18th century, that's marked with a date and is made of silver, as you can tell I really like silver swords, get this. Now, we're on to the last of the 18th century swords. Kind of. This is a hanger. This is German. And it is in generally wonderful shape. The hilt and the guard are just spectacular. It is shagreen, shark or ray skin, and it's perfect. The hilt is absolutely perfect. There's some wear on the blade. The engravings are all still visible. There are no edge nicks. Just generally a wonderful hunting hanger. Though hunting hanger, bit of a misnomer, these were carried by the military. Before regulation, what you had at home is what you bought when you fought. And if an officer wanted to carry his hanger, his small sword, a broadsword, they bought it. So that is what I would call an officer's sidearm, or a gentleman's sidearm. Ooh. Last few, I promise. Transitioning from hangers into older swords, I have a hanger. But this one has a broadsword blade in it. This blade is 17th century. It has some lovely markings in the fuller. It is a cut down. The hilt is in spectacular condition. Again, really nice condition, shagreen. It has some solid. There's a really nicely detailed dog head pommel. And it's just quite nice. It feels good. It is a solid sidearm. The peen is old. This is a period marriage of someone who just happened to have a broadsword blade and didn't want a tiddly little hanger blade. Because some of them, especially the ones coming out of North Germany and France, they tend to have quite delicate blades. And if you have a broadsword, put it in whatever you want. Who's going to stop you? You have a broadsword. This one is a kanjar. This should have really gone with the eastern section at the beginning, but I wanted to show this one as one of the special ones. This is a flamberged, pattern welded, well, this is Ottoman Woots, it is. So that shows up. Hopefully. That is Damascus Twist, which is Ottoman Woots. The Indian or Persian styles of Woots, we call it Sham, but it is just essentially slightly wavy lines all the way up. Not exactly a pattern weld, but not exactly a single steel. And the fact that it has been turned into a flamberge or a flame blade with these is quite nice. It also has a slightly swollen tip. There we go. The scabbard, again, is very good condition. The leather working on it, the dimpled leather work is almost stunning. The hilt has this wonderful little clasp there. And the gilding, I would say just over 50% of the gilding remains, which is a good amount of gilding. Now, we're on the home stretch. And I'm going in with another hanger. This is a Hounslow hanger. And let's see if we can get that. It has a pierced blade. I love these. You don't see them very often. I've had a few, and this one just ticked all my boxes. Firstly, it's not a £3,000 to £5,000 hanger, which some of these are. And I've had one or two of those in stock, not in my personal collection. Can't afford to keep one of them, but they are wonderful. This, however, it ticks a lot of my boxes. So as you can, if I hold that over the white of the t-shirt, you can see it has multiple piercings along the blade. That is like very... It is of the style of the 17th century. You see this in... Well, you also see it in 16th century rapier blades, but with hangers and curved swords, this is more akin to what you would see slightly later. Has a really nice clip point, and if you have good taste, you like clip points. If you don't, you have bad taste, so that's on you if you don't like this. The hilt still has quite a lot of its velvet cover. And this sword hilt actually appears in a book as in the Scottish style. This is a Hounslow hanger from London, but it has been made in the Scottish style. It has a dog attacking a horse or a stag. That has a dog attacking a unicorn on it, which I had not noticed until now. So maybe Scottish. And it has an eagle head quion. That is slightly worn, can't really see what that is. But yeah, wonderful hanger. These are rare. They are hard to find. The fact that I get my hands on one of these a year is good and can be yours. And we were at 48 minutes. This is going to be an hour-long video with me not stopping talking. Thank you for being so patient with me, and thank you for letting me take hydration breaks. So the last three swords are all 17th century. And these are early 17th century. Unlike the hanger, which had a mid 17th century blade, this one is a bilbo. This is a Spanish broadsword that this style, it carries on being used up until the 1728 pattern. So it's used as the 1728 and all the way up through to the 1790s as the Spanish heavy cavalry sword. But these were based on military swords that were used as far back as the I believe 1580s, but this style definitely 1620s. You can see a very good example of this hilt in a painting showing the siege of a city in, oh god, I'm being terrible here. It's been 50 minutes. I looked this up slightly before. Ah, there is a good example of this in one of the sieges in Puerto Rico in 1620, or the 1620s. So quite happy I remember that. It has a double clamshell guard. It covers more of the knuckles, less of the thumb. It has a rather lovely knuckle bow there. The vestigial queons of an arming sword, because this is essentially just an arming sword with more. It is a double-edged broadsword blade. It has likely never sharpened towards the back bottom edge, but it has remains of sharpening all the way up the front and for most of the back. One deep wide fuller there, as you can see. And these are, I've had a few of these. Again, I love them. These are colonial swords from the Spanish Empire, also used by the Portuguese. But the Portuguese ones, they tend to have very deep engravings on. So I am leaning towards Spanish. And this one was likely, as well as being carried in Spain, was likely used in South America. Again, we are sticking with clamshells here. With this is a slightly nicer clamshell, likely for an officer rather than other ranks. And this is the clamshell sabre, which, again, I've owned this before. This has gone to my good friend Charles Lambert of Lambert & Lambert Antiques. And I let it go too cheaply because he's nice, I needed money. It went to someone else and I hunted it down. I wanted it back. And now it's going back up for sale. And hopefully I will get to hold on to it for a little bit longer than last time. This one has a guard very similar to Neapolitan rapier guards. And it is potentially Spanish or Italian. The blade is definitely German. It has Solingen and in Alemannia, so it is made for the Iberian market. The lots of blade makers like Heinrich Kohl would make their swords and change the name. So Heinrich Kohl became Henry Kohl in England and Enrique Coella in Spain, and it would be in England, in Alemannia, and then it would be in German if it was sold in Germany. This blade is a very hefty 17th century sabre blade, or storter blade. These are proto-sabres. It's a very odd one to sort of pin down. They are wonderful swords. They are very heavy. They are very golden age of piracy. And they were used by naval officers. They were used in the American colonies. And they would have even been carried by English and French officers who just had a flair for something a little bit fancy. And finally, we are at 53 minutes. I've shown this sword off before because I love it. I absolutely love it. It is a 1620s North European simple hilted rapier. And it is simple as opposed to a complex hilted rapier. There's nothing simple about this at all. It is beautiful. It is very well made. It feels like nothing in the hand. And hopefully that noise appears on camera. It's lovely. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Don't worry, I will clean this afterwards. It has a gold wire and gold chain link grip, which it bites into the hand, much like that small sword there and that small sword. They have chain and wire grips. They bite into the palm. If you are holding them properly, you will not drop them. They are stunning, they are amazing, and they hurt the hand as well, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. But I like them. They feel good, they look good, they're very chunky as well. And yeah, just the fact that it is a 1620s rapier. It is likely German, English, or Swedish. These fluted pommels are very Scandinavian and appear on later Swedish swords, but they can't really be pinned down to any one nation because it's not a regulation military sword yet. It has a maker's mark in the fuller, and I believe that is TOL, Toledo blade. And the fact that it has one of the iconic blades of the time on such a wonderful hilt, and this hilt is the style of hilt that eventually became the spadroon, or the military sword of the 18th century, almost 200 years before anyone else was really doing this. The North Europeans had these very simple, elegant designs and just flashed them out with the most stunning blades, so well balanced. It feels perfect on just a wonderful lump of gold and steel. Yeah, it's a good sword. It's a nice sword, and I have been talking for almost an hour. So, for anyone who has followed through the entire video, I appreciate you so much. Just watching, liking, subscribing does a lot for the channel. I'm definitely going to make my next video shorter because I can barely talk right now. I'm going to have a good hydration break, and these swords are going up for sale. The first 10 or so are going up tonight. There are more than this. These are just the ones that I wanted to talk about. I have 20 Qatar and half a dozen more Indian tulwars of varying quality, like lower end than this, cheap and cheerfuls. And this is going to be a very busy month for me. Keep an eye out. If there's anything you like the look of, send me messages, comment, and I will get back to you. And all these swords can be yours. Take it easy, sword fans.